In a small, sunlit town where everyone knew everyone's story, Daniel was known for his honesty and quiet strength. He worked as a carpenter, hands rough from labor, heart gentle from kindness. People trusted him with their homes, their furniture, and sometimes their secrets. Then one day, Amara arrived. She was a soft-spoken woman with eyes that carried both grace and sorrow, the kind of eyes that hinted at stories untold. She rented a small room near the church, spent her mornings at the market, and her evenings helping children with schoolwork. No one really knew where she had come from, but everyone had something to say. "She's too quiet," some whispered. "She must be hiding something," others added. But Daniel saw none of that. He saw only her gentleness, the way she treated stray animals, the way she smiled at old women, and how she bowed her head when she prayed. To him, her silence wasn't mystery. It was peace. Their paths crossed often, at the market, at church, at the well. Each time words were few, but eyes spoke volumes. Over time, conversations turned to laughter, and laughter turned to something deeper. A bond neither could explain, but both could feel. When Daniel finally confessed his feelings, Amara hesitated. "I'm not who people think I am," she said softly. "My past, it's complicated." Daniel took her hand, his voice steady. "I don't care where you've been, Amara. I care about who you are now." That simple sentence melted the walls around her heart. Soon, news spread across the village. Daniel was marrying the mysterious woman. Some celebrated, others scoffed. "Love blinds the wise," they said. "He'll regret it one day." But Daniel paid no attention. His faith in Amara was stronger than their gossip. Their wedding was small but beautiful, held under the open sky with wildflowers in her hair and sunlight dancing on their faces. There was laughter, music, and genuine joy. As they exchanged vows, Daniel looked into her eyes and whispered, "No matter what the world says, I'll always choose you." And for that moment, it felt like nothing could break them. Two hearts standing against a world that never believed love could be this pure. The first months of Daniel and Amara's marriage felt like a dream. Their little home, built on the edge of the village, wasn't fancy. Just 2 rooms, a small garden, and a wooden porch where they'd sit every evening watching the sunset. Yet to Daniel, it was heaven. Amara filled the house with warmth. She woke early, made breakfast before Daniel left for work, and often packed lunch for the neighbors' children who had little to eat. She volunteered at the church, cared for the sick, and offered help wherever it was needed. "Your wife has a golden heart," people would tell Daniel, and he would smile proudly, replying, "I already know." Their love was quiet but strong, built not on luxury, but on laughter and prayer. Daniel often told his friends, "Love isn't about what you have. It's about who you are when everything else is gone." Amara seemed to embody that belief. She was gentle, patient, and endlessly kind. When Daniel came home tired, she listened. When neighbors quarreled, she brought peace. It was as if she was determined to give light wherever she went. But beneath her calm smile, something stirred. Sometimes, late at night, Daniel would wake and find Amara sitting by the window. Her eyes glistening with tears she quickly wiped away. When he asked, "Are you all right?" she would nod and say softly, "Just missing someone." There was also a small wooden box she kept in their bedroom, always locked, always tucked neatly under a shawl. Daniel had noticed it, of course, but he never asked. He trusted her completely, believing that love meant giving space to secrets not yet ready to be told. Every few days, Amara would write letters, neatly, carefully, then walk to the old post office at the edge of town. She never mentioned who she wrote to, and Daniel, out of love and respect, never pressed her. Still, a quiet unease began to grow inside him, not born of suspicion, but of curiosity. Sometimes he wondered what part of her life she had left behind, but each time he looked at her, cooking, laughing, tending the garden, his doubts faded. Maybe, he thought, everyone carries a past they'd rather keep silent. For Daniel, the present was enough. He had love, peace, and a woman whose kindness touched every soul around her. Yet somewhere in the stillness of their perfect beginning, a shadow lingered, faint, hidden, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. It was an ordinary afternoon, sunlight spilling through the kitchen window, the scent of stew filling the air, Amara was humming softly as she chopped vegetables when a sudden knock echoed through the door. She froze. It wasn't the polite, rhythmic tap of a neighbor. It was firm, impatient, almost desperate. Wiping her hands on her apron, she hesitated before opening it. On the doorstep stood an older man, weary and dust-covered, his eyes searching hers as though they carried years of untold stories. "Amara," he said quietly. "It's been a long time." The sound of her name in his voice made her knees weaken. Her lips trembled. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. The man's face softened. "I just needed to see if you're all right. After everything that happened." "Please." She cut him off, glancing nervously toward the road. "You must go. If Daniel comes back and sees you—" He sighed, nodding slowly. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Just remember, the truth doesn't stay buried forever." Before she could reply, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a heart racing with fear. Amara closed the door and pressed her back against it, struggling to breathe. Her hands shook as she poured herself a glass of water, but even that trembled in her grasp. For hours, she sat in silence, staring at the floor. Memories she had fought so hard to bury came flooding back. Names, places, faces she had prayed never to see again. When Daniel returned home that evening, cheerful from work, he noticed her swollen eyes immediately. "Amara, what happened?" he asked gently, setting down his bag. She forced a smile. "Just tired." The sun was harsh today, but her voice was thin, her smile weaker than usual. He sat beside her, concern in his eyes. "You've been quiet lately. Is something troubling you?" Her fingers tightened around the edge of her dress. For a moment she wanted to tell him, to confess everything, to let the burden fall away. But fear stopped her. "No," she said softly. "Everything's fine." Daniel didn't press further. He reached for her hand and kissed her forehead, whispering, "Whatever it is, we'll face it together when you're ready." Amara nodded, but deep inside, she knew some storms couldn't be faced together. Not yet. That night as Daniel slept, she walked to the window and stared at the empty road where the stranger had stood. The moonlight shimmered on her tear-streaked face. She whispered into the night, "Why now? Why did you come back?" It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. Daniel was tidying their small living room while Amara went to the market. He reached for a misplaced book on the shelf, but as it slipped from his hands, a small folded envelope fell to the floor. At first, he thought little of it, perhaps a bill or an old receipt. But when he saw Amara's name written in her own handwriting, and the word "unsent" in the corner, curiosity froze him in place. For a long moment, he stared at it, torn between trust and worry. Then, with a hesitant sigh, he unfolded the paper. Inside was a letter not meant for him, but for someone named. "To the one who may one day love me despite my past." Daniel's hands trembled as he began to read. "There are things I've never said out loud," the letter began, "because once you speak pain into the world, it becomes real again." She wrote about her childhood, how her family lived in a small riverside village that was washed away by a sudden flood. She described the rain that wouldn't stop, the screams in the dark, and the way the water tore through their home like a monster. "I was the only one who survived," she wrote. "I watched my mother and father disappear beneath the current. I was only 12. Daniel stopped reading for a moment, his heart pounding. He could almost see her, that quiet strength, that sadness she never explained. The letter went on. "After that night, everything changed. The flood was on the news for weeks. People called me the miracle girl, but I never felt like a miracle. I felt guilty for surviving when they didn't. They placed me in an orphanage. People came, asking for interviews, sponsors, charity. I hated it. I didn't want pity. I didn't want to be remembered as a tragedy. So when I turned 18, I left. I changed towns, changed my name, and promised myself one thing: never to tell anyone who I really was. I just wanted a normal life, where people saw me for who I am, not for what I lost." Daniel's eyes blurred with tears. Each line felt like a wound opening inside him. He could feel the weight she had carried in silence, the reason behind her late-night tears, the way she sometimes stared at the rain without a word. The final paragraph broke him completely. "If I ever find love, I'll tell the truth when I feel brave enough, not because I owe it, but because love deserves honesty. Until then, this letter will hold the part of me I'm still learning to forgive." Daniel folded the paper carefully, his hands trembling. He sat for a long time, staring at the wall, the silence pressing heavy around him. When Amara returned, she noticed the letter in his hand. Her face went pale. He looked up, eyes wet but gentle. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly, tears welled in hers. "Because I didn't want to be a story you pitied." "I wanted to be a person you loved." Daniel stepped forward and took her hand. "The world once called you," Amara broke down, the years of silence melting into tears that felt like release. The evening was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that follows after truth has been uncovered. Heavy and waiting, Amara sat by the window, staring at the soft glow of the street lamp outside. Her hands trembled as Daniel entered the room, holding the letter. He had been calm all day, but she could see the questions in his eyes, questions that would no longer wait. "Amara," he said gently, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Tell me everything, please." Her lips parted, but no words came at first. She looked at the letter in his hand and whispered, "You read it?" Daniel nodded slowly. "I had to. I didn't mean to invade your privacy. I needed to understand the woman I love." For a moment, Amara said nothing. Then she took a deep breath, her eyes glistening. "It wasn't just a flood, Daniel," she began, her voice breaking slightly. "It was the night everything and everyone I loved disappeared." She closed her eyes, the memories flooding back. "I was 12. The rain had been falling for days. The river behind our home had grown wild. My father said it would calm by morning, but it didn't." Her voice quivered. "That night the water came like a monster. It tore through the walls. I remember screaming for my mother, grabbing my little brother's hand, but the current was too strong." Daniel moved closer, his chest tight. "I tried to hold on to him," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But he slipped away. I thought it was over for me too. But somehow, I found a piece of driftwood, and then I heard children crying nearby. I swam toward them. There were 3 of them trapped on a floating door. I don't know how I did it, but I held them together until someone found us." Her voice cracked completely. "They called me the miracle girl. Reporters came, cameras, charities. They all wanted a story. But I wasn't a miracle. I was broken." She turned toward Daniel, her face raw with pain. "Every time someone recognized me, they'd ask how it felt to survive, and I'd have to relive it. So I ran. I left everything. I changed my name, changed my life. I just wanted peace. I just wanted to stop being a memory of tragedy." Daniel's eyes softened. He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing away her tears. "Amara, you didn't hide because you were ashamed," he said quietly. "You hid because you were still healing." She nodded, crying softly. "I wanted to tell you, Daniel. I just didn't know how. I didn't want my past to be a burden on our happiness." He cupped her face gently. "Your past doesn't make me love you less. It only makes me see your strength more clearly." For the first time in years, Amara let herself cry freely, not in secret, but in the arms of someone who finally understood. The camera lingers on their embrace. Rain begins to fall outside, echoing her memories, but this time it's gentle, cleansing. It began quietly, the way most storms do. A local newspaper printed a small story about Daniel and Amara's new community project, featuring a smiling photo of her. It was meant to be a simple piece about kindness, but one reader, an elderly journalist, felt a jolt of recognition. He had seen that face before. Within days, the headline appeared online: "The Miracle Girl Who Vanished, Found After 15 Years." At first, Amara didn't notice. She was out tending her small garden, humming softly as she watered the flowers. Daniel came running outside, phone in hand, his face pale. "Amara." "They know," she frowned, confused. "Who knows?" He turned the screen toward her. Her own face, younger, drenched, frightened, clutching 3 children during the Great Flood, stared back from a faded newspaper photo. Beneath it, the words, "The child hero who disappeared after saving lives." Her breath caught. "No, no, I didn't want this." Daniel pulled her into his arms. "We'll face it together." By the next morning, cars began arriving on the narrow road leading to their house. Journalists, cameras, microphones. Some shouted her name, others whispered in disbelief. Neighbors peeked through curtains as the quiet home of Daniel and Amara became the center of the nation's attention. A news anchor stood outside their gate. After years of mystery, The little girl who once captured hearts has finally been found, now living a simple, humble life. Amara stayed inside, trembling. Daniel, I didn't want this attention. I didn't want to be a symbol again. He took her hands gently. Then let's not let them make you one. Let them see who you really are. Not a miracle, but a woman who survived. That afternoon, Amara stepped outside. The crowd quieted as she walked toward the gate, her dress simple, her eyes calm. Cameras flashed, but she didn't flinch. A young reporter asked softly, "Miss Amara, why did you disappear all those years ago?" She paused, her voice steady though her heart raced. "Because sometimes surviving isn't the hard part," she said. "It's learning how to live again." The words hung in the air. Even the cameras seemed to lower. Then, something unexpected happened. One by one, people from nearby villages began arriving. Families who had once been saved in that same flood. They carried flowers, photos, and tears. An old woman stepped forward, clutching Amara's hands. "You pulled my grandson out of the water that night," she whispered. "We never forgot. We prayed for you every year." Tears filled Amara's eyes. She had hidden for so long. Yet these people had remembered her not as a ghost of tragedy, but as a symbol of hope. That evening, the setting sun bathed the yard in gold. The reporters had left, leaving behind only quiet admiration and gifts at the gate, letters, flowers, candles. Amara sat on the porch, exhausted but at peace. Daniel joined her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "You didn't lose your peace," he said softly. "You shared it." She smiled faintly, looking out at the horizon. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. Maybe the world needs to remember that courage doesn't need fame, just faith." Daniel kissed her forehead. "And I'm proud of the woman I married. Not because she was a miracle, but because she's human." The hall was filled with warm light and quiet anticipation. Banners hung from the walls, honoring courage, celebrating hope. The air carried a gentle hum of respect, not the frenzy of news cameras this time, but genuine admiration. Amara sat beside Daniel in the front row, still shy under the attention. She wore a simple cream dress, no jewelry, no makeup, just the same quiet grace that had always defined her. Around her sat the very people she had once saved, grown children, their parents, and townsfolk who had traveled miles just to see her honored. When her name was called, the applause was soft but endless. Amara rose slowly, her eyes glistening, and walked to the stage. The mayor presented her with a framed plaque that read, "For bravery beyond years, for a heart that turned tragedy into hope, Amara." The light after the storm. As the audience stood, she took a deep breath. Her voice, though gentle, carried through the hall. "I don't know if I deserve all this," she began. "Because that night I wasn't thinking of being brave. I was just trying to help." Her eyes softened as she looked at the rows of faces watching her. "People called me a miracle, but I wasn't. I was scared. I cried. I lost everything. But I learned something. That kindness doesn't die in the water, and love doesn't drown." The hall grew still. "I didn't survive to be famous," she continued. "I survived to remind people that love and kindness outlive tragedy. That even in the darkest flood, there's always someone holding on. Not for themselves, but for another." Her words settled in every heart present. Some wept quietly. Others simply nodded, understanding that her story was no longer about the past. It was about how people could live with courage and compassion now. Amara looked toward Daniel in the front row. He smiled at her, his eyes proud and tender. She reached out her hand toward him, and he met her halfway, their fingers intertwining as the audience rose in a standing ovation. The lights above them shimmered like reflections on water, soft, golden, forgiving. For the first time in years, Amara smiled without fear, not as the miracle girl, not as a survivor of tragedy, but as a woman who had turned her pain into purpose. The world slowly quieted after the attention faded. Reporters moved on to other stories, and life returned to its gentle rhythm. But for Daniel, nothing was the same. Everything felt deeper, more meaningful. He often sat by the porch in the evenings, watching Amara tend to her small garden. The sun would set behind her, painting her silhouette in gold, and he'd think about how strange life was, how the woman once hidden behind silence and sorrow had become a voice of hope for so many. I used to think love was about knowing everything about someone, their past, their truth, their secrets. But I've learned that real love isn't built on what we know. It's built on what we choose to hold on to, even when everything is revealed. He looks at Amara as she waters the flowers, her expression peaceful, no longer burdened by fear or shame. Her secret didn't divide us, he continues. It united everyone who heard her story, because pain, when shared with love, becomes light. And that light, it never fades. Amara turns toward him, smiling, that same quiet smile that first drew him to her. He walks over, takes her hand, and together they watch the horizon. The breeze rustles the trees, carrying echoes of the past, not heavy anymore, but gentle, almost like a song. Daniel whispers, "You taught me that love isn't about perfection, Amara. It's about truth, about healing." She leans her head on his shoulder, and about never being afraid to begin again.